Hi everyone, welcome to English 1C, Section 17, um, Fall 2020, right? And I am your instructor for this class. My name is David Siglos. You can call me David, you can call me Mr. Siglos, either way is fine with me. So first, I'll start by acknowledging that this quarter is a particularly difficult quarter for everyone, right? With everything that's going on, right? The pandemic, the messy election that we're about to go through, that we're kind of going through already, the crazy president that we have right now, right? Protests against institutions, right, and a reckoning with American institutions that's happening right now. All of these things, right, are happening, and also, I am not a trained online instructor, right? This is my third time doing an online class, but I am not sort of properly trained for online teaching, and so I try to do the best that I can. Um, Right. So with all of those things, right, I've just sort of managed to successfully teach online by reducing the amount of workload, right, and just to be practical, right. So having understood the difficulty of this setup, right, I've yeah, I've lightened the load for the class, and I've been, very flexible in terms of due dates and deadlines and things like that. And as long as you're communicating with me, whatever sort of issues or delays that happen, with you in submitting anything for the class, I'm very flexible, right? As long as you communicate with me. Um, that said, right, I try to be realistic and lighten the workload, but also, right, I want you to get the best out of this class. You know, I want to make sure that you get what you paid for this class, right, which is supposed to be, to learn how to compose essays and arguments, right, and to learn how to think critically, right. So I don't want to um, even though I try to lighten the load, I want to make sure that you get sort of um, the best that you can, right, in terms of composing essays and analyzing literature, right. So we will still do all of those things, right. Um, and lastly, I guess if nothing else, right, I hope you enjoy the readings for our class, because I've picked all of these readings just based on what I'm working on in my own research, but also just things that I enjoy reading, right. These readings that we're going to be reading, these are authors that I've read in the past and whose writings I've really sort of enjoyed reading, and there's something that I read for fun, right? But there are also things that I have to read for my research, but I also enjoy them, personally. So I hope you enjoy them too. Right. So again, my name is David Siglos Jr. Right, and you can call me David, Mr. Siglos. I'm a fourth year PhD student in the English department, right? And I don't know. I'm sure most of you are familiar with graduate studies, right? So it's usually you get your BA and you get your bachelor's. That's what most of you guys are doing, and then if you want to sort of um, progress into graduate studies, you usually typically get your master's, right? Um, that's usually a 2-year program to get a master's degree. And then once you get your master's, then you can go on to apply for a PhD program, which takes about another 5 to 6 years, right, on top of your master's, right? So I'm technically in the fourth year of my PhD program. Um, and I also got my master's in English here at UCR 2 years ago. Right? And so my research is on Filipino American literature. Right. So I'm thinking about Filipino American literature in terms of how it fits or does not fit, right, in Asian American literature, but also how it fits and how it doesn't fit, right, in American literature at large, right. I'm thinking about Filipino mimicry, imitation, right, and Filipino unrecognizability, right. These are things that I'm very interested in, and how Filipinos sort of mimic and imitate American culture. Um, but I argue that that imitation or that mimicry is not just mimicry, right, or imitation or simple imitation, right, but actually there is sort of an act of creativity and resistance in that act of imitation, right? So that sort of creativity and imitation, and creativity or resistance in imitation, is something that I'm interested in, right? And this is something that we can talk about later on, or I will talk more about, especially when we get to the last short story that we're going to be reading, which is Kunanan's Wake by Gina Apostol. Gina Apostol is a Filipino-American writer. And I will talk more about sort of Filipino-American history and Philippine history and Filipino-American literature, right, when I discuss that short story at the end of the quarter. So I guess that's enough about myself for now. Eventually throughout the quarter, I will, you'll get to know me more, and hopefully I'll get to know you more as we meet. But right now I'll just go through the syllabus, right? And yeah, I'll just read them and then sort of explain what I mean by them, and how we're going to sort of tackle this quarter, right? All right, so just make sure you have your syllabus handy with you as I go through it, so you have something to refer to. So again, this is English 1C, Fall 2020, right? And I've titled it American Short Stories, right? Which is what we're going to be reading, American Short Stories, right? I decided to do American or short stories just in general because it's easier to find copies or PDF copies, free copies of short stories, especially popular short stories, right? And I've also noticed that students tend to react more positively with short stories because our reading sort of our attention span in reading is shorter, right? With we're in an age of social media and technology and all this stuff that distract us, right? So it's harder for us to pay attention and to read, even for me, right? Read longer sort of novels, perhaps, right? Although you should still find a way to do that. But I think American short stories or short stories, right? They're just easier to digest, and you get an instant satisfaction that you've finished reading something, right? You can finish them in like one sitting or maybe two sitting, right? And you get the story, right? And you can say that I've read Tobias Wolff, I've read Flannery O'Connor, right, and Jhumpa Lahiri, and all of this, right, after this class, right. So that's something to be proud about. Right. So American short stories, and also I picked American short stories because I'm also a big fan of American short stories, right. And it's also a good way to kind of introduce to you different writers from different backgrounds, right? Obviously, if we were doing a larger or just one or two novels, right? I would just be introducing, one or two authors, right? Um, but with short stories, I can do five authors, right? And what that means is I'm able to introduce to you guys sort of like different perspectives of different of American authors that come from different backgrounds, right? As you will notice later on, the authors that I've chosen have very different sort of um, um, I guess, gender, cultural um, backgrounds, right? Different literary backgrounds, right? Um, and I chose that to kind of, um, I guess, to exemplify, right, the diversity of American voices, American literary voices, right, and American narratives, right. Um, So we will have Tobias Wolff, right, who is a very sort of canonical, right? By that I mean like very traditional storyteller, right? And then we have Flannery O'Connor, who has a more sort of Southern Gothic point of view, thinking about religion, race, and gender, right, in the American South, right. And then we get Jhumpa Lahiri, right, who is an American whose family is from India, right, and so she thinks about issues of immigration and belonging or not belonging, right. And we have James Baldwin, right, who thinks about blackness in America, right, and also queerness. James Baldwin is also a gay man and a black man, right, and so he thinks about sexuality and race, right, and then Gina Apostol, right. A less mainstream name, right? But she is kind of a big name in terms of Filipino American literature, and this is my way of sort of introducing and Filipino American literature is not quite in the mainstream of American literature, right? And she is a good sort of introduction to, I think, to Filipino American literature, right? So we get all of these different voices, different backgrounds, right? Who are ultimately thinking about American literature, right? So they'll be a good way to kind of um, get a sense, right, of the diversity of American voices. All right, so on top of the page, you have my email address, right? That will be your friend for this quarter. Anything, any inquiries that you have, any questions, just email me, right? I don't really like using iLearn. I use it to post announcements, and we use it to for you guys to submit your papers, right? But that's about it. It's I don't know. I don't like it, and it's an inconvenience to use. I think, which is ironic because it's supposed to be, it's supposed to make our lives easier, right? But it's not very well set up. I don't think. But anyway, yeah. So just any questions, any concerns, or whatever. If you want to reach me, um, email me, right? And then I'm also sharing you my phone number. Use that in case of emergencies. If you want to reach me right away, feel free to use that. Also, if you prefer FaceTime meetings, right, you can use that. And then office hours, they're only by appointment, right? And I would prefer just doing that through Zoom, right? If you don't like Zoom, we can talk about it, other options, but I think Zoom would be preferable for me. Yeah, so anytime throughout the quarter you want to meet up, you have questions that you want to talk about, right? You want me to go through your paper, um, through your draft, that is, just schedule a meeting with me, and we'll set that up through Zoom. Right. Okay. And then I added a little note here about the protests that's going on, right? And more specifically for UCR, right? There is a move, right? And this move has been going on for years, right? But it's sort of amplified because of what happened in the last couple of months, right? Which is to abolish, right, the UCR Police Department, right? And so, right, I want to sort of express my solidarity regarding the efforts to abolish the UCR Police Department, right? And not just the UCR police, and this is something that we will talk about later on, right? As we think about race, especially when we read Sonny's Blues, right? Thinking about race and blackness in America and institutions, including the police as an institution, the university as an institution, right? The police institution really has a very racist history, right? It has a history of slave patrol, which is policing enslaved people here in America, right? And really, the police is not interested in protecting. And you can say that there are some good cops out there, right, who actually care about people. Yeah, that's fair. That's true anywhere, right? There's good and bad people everywhere, right? But the institution itself, right, has a racist history, and the institution is not really, it's not there to protect people, right? It's there to protect property, and it's there to protect itself, right? And it's there to accumulate power, to make itself more powerful, right? And sort of monopolize violence, right? And justify that violence, right? And obviously, if you are a person, a wealthy person who owns property, right, then you get protected. You are protected by the police not because of the person, but because of the property, right? And so that is sort of the logic, right, of the institution itself. And the effects of that has been to sort of violate, right, disproportionately black, brown, indigenous, queer, trans, and poor people, right? And for UCR specifically, which is a very diverse university, right, it has more, students of color, right? If the police is a threat to people of color, right, and majority of our students are people of color, then the police is really there as a threat to the students, right, and not as a sense of security, right. And that is part of the sort of part of the argument, right, in abolishing police department at UCR, right. And if you guys want to talk more about that, just we can talk about that during the Zoom meeting or in our office hours, right. But yeah, I just want to leave that there for now. All right, and so moving on, course description, right? So English 1C constitutes the final course in the English composition series. 1A explored several different genres of writing. 1B developed and sharpened your argumentative writing. And now in 1C, you will apply those composition skills to a variety of texts in order to support a central thesis statement through rigorous analysis and research, right? In 1C, reading becomes as important as writing, right? That is, you will be made more aware of reading as an interpretive act requiring critical scrutiny of underlying presuppositions. You will deepen your understanding of the shaping power of language and its conventions and become more aware of the collaborative nature of generating meaning. Right. Basic concepts of literary and or cultural theory will also be introduced. Right. So this is 1C class, right? So presumably you have taken English 1A, English 1B, right? So so I will just assume that most of you, have at least sort of like basic knowledge of construction of essays, construction of arguments, right? How to structure an argumentative essay, right? Introduction, three body uh, three body paragraphs, right, and then conclusion, right? Where to put the thesis, things like that. I would just assume that you know that, right? But if you do not know that, that's also, don't be afraid to ask for help, right? If you if it's been a while since you've taken your other English classes and things are hazy, or you're not familiar with the basic structures anymore, I think I suggest meeting with me one-on-one or just emailing me, right? So I can also include that in my lectures, right? I think I will also include that, right? Whenever I'm going to part of our readings are examples of essays, right? And so I will talk about structure, right, and also grammar a little bit, right? But as a 1C class, right, we just assume that you should have some knowledge of grammar and some knowledge of how to construct essays, at least on the basic level, right? I'm also not too strict with grammar, right? Obviously, you should do your best, proofread, right? If you have issues with grammar, I suggest going to what is that? To the ARC, Academic Resource Center. Yeah, Academic Resource Center. They will help you sort of in terms of grammar and in terms of structure, right? There's resources here too. Yeah, support services. Yeah, so you should do your best, right, to write grammatically, right, and use different resources, right? There's apps now. There's a lot of things, right, to that you can use now to improve grammar. But ultimately, right, English is also like not my first language, right? I was born in the Philippines, and I came to America when I was 16. And so I speak two different Filipino languages, Bisaya and Tagalog. I'm more comfortable with Bisaya, as that Bisaya is my mother tongue, right? I also speak Tagalog because that's the national language in the Philippines. I speak English, obviously, but I don't even know like which language I'm more comfortable, right? And so I get it, right? Like I came to America, so like not knowing proper grammar, and maybe that's why I became an English major, because I really wanted to prove to myself that I can be good at grammar. And even until now, right, I'm still, it doesn't come naturally to me. Grammar doesn't, English grammar that is, or any grammar for that matter, it doesn't come naturally to me because, I had three languages to manage in my head, right? And I know a lot of you are also at least bilingual, right? And come from different backgrounds, and so you might also feel not very comfortable with grammar, with English grammar, and so like I'm not too strict about that, so I wouldn't worry too much about that, right? And also, grammar is a colonial technology, right? Is used to suppress people, to inferiorize people of different cultures, right? And so, grammar is also kind of fucked up. So I have no loyalties towards grammar, right? But obviously, it's something that we have to learn, right, to become, you know, to get the jobs that we want, to whatever, do the things that we need to do in this capitalist society, right? Right. So for this class, obviously, we need to be able. I need to know, right, that you guys are capable of structuring a good argumentative essay, right, and arguing in a coherent way, right. But more importantly, I think what I want from you all is to really have a good sense of the stories, right, and how to analyze stories, right, and how to analyze them and critique them, right, and read closely, right, and find symbolisms and different kinds of interpretations, right, that we can get um, um, out of the stories, right? And the way that I want you to look at these stories, right? They're like most of the stories that we'll be reading are, what you would consider as realist, right? And even though realist stories, right, are based on something that is real, right? It's not real, right? It's made up. It's sort of it's an interpretation of perhaps the author's experience or observations and things like that, right? And so the author makes up this world, right, where that that is relatable to real life, but it's not real, right? It's made of symbols. It's made of sort of characters that are made up, right? It's made of settings that are made up, right? And it's made of sort of drama that is made up, right? And so it's our job as literary critics, right, to sort of to figure out those symbols, right, to find out or to kind of point out those symbols and connect them in such a way, or disconnect them, right, and create sort of interpretations, meanings out of them, right, based on how we understand them to be symbols of, right. And so yeah, so that's really what I'm interested in from you, is for you to read the short stories carefully and deeply and closely, right, and to be able to analyze them, right, in a very thoughtful way, right, and in a unique way, right, because there are basic interpretations, right, you can spark notes things, and spark notes will tell you, oh, this is what this symbol means, right, and whatever, those are basic things, right, but if you give me something new, something interesting, right, or something against what most interpretations are, right, those are more interesting to me than just the basic interpretation, right. Yeah, so those are kind of my own sort of expectations from the papers, right. For the required text, right, so as I mentioned, the only thing that's required for you to acquire is arguing about literature, right, and make sure it's the third edition, right. If it's not the third edition, it has different pages, it has different there's missing parts, so it's really hard for you to keep up with me, because I will be, when I do my lecture, right, so obviously I'll do my lecture and I'll be referring to, so this is what it looks like, right, and there's an e-copy that I've given you a link here if you want to get the ebook version. Yeah, so I'll be going through it and referring to page numbers, and if you don't have the right edition, then you will not be able to keep up with me. Right? So um, if for some reason you can't afford it, just let me know. Right? I will help you find a way to to get it. And I will not ask questions. Right? Just let me know you can't afford it, then I'll find a way. I'll figure out whatever to give you the book. Right. So required tools, internet connection, YouTube access, Microsoft Office, right, and Zoom, right. If you do not have Microsoft Word, I really urge you to get one, and you can get one for free through UCR, right. UCR students have access to Microsoft Office for free, right? If you need help doing that, let me know, right? And I'll get you the link. But all of your essays, right? I would really prefer that you submit them through Word doc, right? It's just easier for me to organize them and to comment on them through Word doc, right? Because that's kind of like my main means of doing everything, right? Pretty old school that way. So yeah, so make sure you have Microsoft Word. All right, so grade breakdown. So this class requires you to write 3 papers of increasing sophistication. You will also be assigned regular reading responses, right? So, so the breakdown here, the first paper is 20%, right? Minimum of 1,100 words. Second paper is 20%, 1,200 words. Third paper is 25%, 1,400 words. So that's significantly longer, right? And then your reading responses, right, is 25%. So I think in my first email I told you that you are required to do reading responses every week, but actually you're only doing responses for the short stories, right? So that's only, I think, 5 short stories, and so you're only required 5 reading responses, right? And the schedule will reflect that, right? So the responses are not weekly, right? Just whatever is indicated in the schedule, right? So that's 25%. So that's a pretty good chunk, right? And usually there are 4 papers for this class, right? But I cut it down to 3 because of, like it's just not. I just don't think it's possible to do 4 papers. It's even hard to do 4 papers on a regular class setting, right? But then online, it's just impossible, I think. And so 3, I think, is good. But then obviously, I'm compensating that by doing reading responses, right? Right. And then participation is 10%, right? And as you notice, there's no final exam. We don't have final exam for this class, right? I've included final exams in the past, in like the last 2 quarters that I taught online, and I always ended up just canceling them and giving everyone an A, right? So I figured I'll just, get rid of it altogether, right? Especially because on the week of the finals, you are you have to submit your final paper, right? And so that's enough work, I think, right? So participation, right, is 10%. So participation, like I mentioned, as long as you show up to 2 Zoom meetings on Wednesdays, that you will get the 10% automatically, right? Just show up and ask a question, or just participate, right? Just say something, and you'll get the 10% to 2 Zoom meetings, right? Now, if you don't want to do that, then you can schedule 1 office hours, or yeah, you schedule one office hour um, throughout the quarter, and then that will get you the 10%, right? And it's only 1 office hours because like during office hours, it's just one-on-one, right? And it's usually longer that we talk, right? And so I will count that as 10%, right? So if you do an appointment with me at least once in the quarter, right? A Zoom office hours, that will count as 10%, right? So again, 2 Zoom meetings Wednesdays, or 1 office hours, right? Or office hour, right? Will get you the participation, right? And required formatting, right? Make sure you read through this, typical stuff. Times New Roman, 1-inch margin, double space, right? The first page on the upper left must display the student's name, instructor's name, blah, blah, right? So these are basic stuff that, you should already be doing. Just reread this and make sure you follow this. You will also get a prompt for every essay that you're writing, right? So you will have clearer instructions there on how to structure your paper. All right, so also on the top of the third page, right, I have some links here to OWL Purdue, and this is, I think, the most reliable site in terms of citations, right, and how to use MLA format and citations, right, to how to create a works cited page and things like that. Right? So check those out if you need help with that. And support services, right? There's the Academic Resource Center. There's also the link to disabled students programs and services, right? So if you have some form of disability, contact them, and then they will let me know about it, right? And what kind of accommodations I can offer. Right, so plagiarism and academic honesty, right? So don't plagiarize. Try to do your own work and do your own, write your own ideas, right? And then attendance and late work, right? So there are due dates, right? That you're supposed to submit all this stuff, right? But for me, like, as long as you're communicating with me, right? Just if you want an extra day, extra 2 days, extra 3 days, right, to write your paper, just let me know. Just email me, and you will not be penalized, right? As long as you're communicating with me, right? And I won't ask why, right? Just say that I need 2 more days to finish this paper, right? And then you get it without penalty, right? So I'm very flexible in terms of that, right? I suggest not turning it in too late, right? Because obviously then you're just, accumulating your work, and then you'll become overwhelmed, right? But yeah, if you can't do it on the due date, just let me know. All right, communication standards, right? Contact me. Try to only use your UCR email address whenever you're emailing me, right? And I usually respond, right? If I don't respond in more than 48 hours, just let me know. Just kind of check in with me, because I could have forgotten. I get a lot of emails. Yeah, so I won't take offense if you if you email me and say, hey, what's up? You didn't reply to me, right? That's perfectly fine. All right, so schedule. I hope the schedule is self-explanatory, right? But so week 0, we're done with that. I asked you to write an introduction, and most of you have sent me their introductions already, and right. So that's fine. So starting week 1, right, which is Monday, October 5th. Here it says read syllabus, right, and then watch my introduction video, which is this video, right. So yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory. And so the only reason why I have Monday here, I wrote Monday, is that I aim to upload the videos every Monday, right? So yeah, and then it says Wednesday, read Bullet in the Train, right? And then watch Tobias Wolff interview, right? So that says Wednesday, but obviously you can do that any time of the week, right? But obviously you have to do it throughout the week because the reading response is due that Sunday. And obviously you have to read the short story before you can write the reading response, right, which is due on that Sunday. Right, so you're expected to do all these readings throughout the week. And then the following Monday, I will have the lecture about the short story the week before, right? So by the time you watch the lecture video, you should have already read the story, and you should have already written the response, right? So that I don't pollute you, with ideas, right? You write your response paper based on your initial impression of the story, right? And so for the reading response, I don't really ask for anything in specific, right? So the reading response is just for me to know that you've read the story, right? So just mention your initial impression, what was interesting, what was not interesting about the story, right? There's no real, there's no real standard for the reading response, right? They're kind of informal, right? Just kind of your own opinions, right? Your own personal opinion about the story. But keep it at 250 to 300 words, right? And then submit it to me as a Google Doc, PDF, Word doc, whatever, right? And there's no proper format, any format is fine as long as I can read it, right? Okay, so that's for week 1, and then week 2, you have the lecture here, and then, so the Zoom reading group will start in week 2, right? So there's no Zoom meeting in week 1, right? So week 2, Wednesday, October 14th, that's our first Zoom meeting. Obviously, that's optional. And that's from 1 to 1:50, right? So that's our scheduled time for this class, right? So, so that's not outside of our class time frame, right? So, because our regular meeting for this class is supposed to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 to 1:50 p.m., right? And then on week 2, you are expected also to read Arguing About Literature from pages 1 to 80, right? And that seems like a lot, 80 pages, right? But also think about it. It's a reading assignment for the entire week, right? So you have the entire week to read it. Yeah, if you think about it, if you read like 10 pages a day, then yeah, you can do it in like, I don't know, 8 days. So, so that's more than a week. Anyway, yeah, but I think 80 pages in a week is very doable. All right, so week 3, lecture again, right? Zoom meeting. And then week 3, you're supposed to read Arguing About Literature, 82 to 137. And then you also have to read Everything That Rises Must Converge by Flannery O'Connor, right? And then the reading response, right? So the reading response is only for the short stories, right? Don't write a response about arguing about literature, right? Only for the short stories. Right, and then the first paper is due Sunday, November 1st, right, through Safe Assign and iLearn, right. And so whenever I'm doing a lecture on arguing about literature, right, I will also be talking about how, about your essay and how to structure your essay and what kinds of things I'm looking for in an essay, right. And so this is your guide to the essay, right? If you don't have this and if you don't read this, you will not be able to write a good essay, even if you're reading all of the short stories, right? You will not be able to, write a good essay, because here there are examples of the essays and how to structure the essay and how to close read, how to use literature, right? And so the way that, okay, so for the first paper, right, you can only write about either Bullet in the Brain or Everything That Rises Must Converge, right? So for the first paper, you're only allowed to write about the short stories that we've already discussed, right? Yeah. And I will give you a prompt, right, a week before it's due, that this is what you're supposed to do, right? So while you're reading the short stories, right, think about if you want to write about it in your paper, right? Because you have to pick one of the stories to write in your paper, right? So essay 1, you should only write about Everything That Rises or Bullet in the Brain, right? And then for essay 2, you should only write about either Sunny's Blues by James Baldwin or A Temporary Matter by Jhumpa Lahiri, right? Now for the third paper, the final paper, you can write about anything in the class, like any of the short stories, except for the one that you've already written about, right? And then I will talk more about that, or I will make sure to mention that in the prompt. Right. Right. So, all right. So week 7, no readings. I think this is like week 7, week 8. It's I think it's Thanksgiving, so. I mean, it doesn't really matter because, it's online, but I figured, I'll just make that week, easy because of Thanksgiving. But it's not really that easy because you have a lot of readings for week 8, but, whatever. Anyway, I think that's it. Yeah, I hope I was clear about things. And if not, just email me if things aren't clear to me, or show up in one of the meetings, and then we can talk about it. And I'll try to, if you email me, I'll try to mention that in my lecture too, the answers in my lecture, right? And so you really have to watch the lecture. You can't get away from this class without, without watching the lectures. Because in the lecture, even though it says, lecture on Bullet in the Brain, right, the short story, but I will also make announcements, right, and I will also talk about how to write, how to structure your papers. I will talk about a lot of things, right? So you will miss a lot if you don't watch one lecture video, right? And you can watch the lecture video anytime. So I'll try not to make them too long, but if they're long, you'll just have to suck it up. Okay. Yeah, but I can't express enough how important it is for you to read the readings. I think they're very doable. The amount of load work that I'm giving you is very reasonable, I think. So yeah, do the readings and watch the lecture videos, and you'll be fine. You'll do well in my class. Yeah, so I think that's it. Again, email me with any questions, and I will see you in the next video.